Tonight on God Bless America 33, Iran's president is begging the IRGC to end the war now. Seems like the economic squeeze Trump is putting on Iran is already earning dividends. I will show you footage from Fox and CNN that show equal levels of optimism about the Iran war now that Trump has implemented his economic D-Day. And we will be discussing the implications tonight. Israel, on the other hand, is at the receiving end of a bombshell joint statement from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. Did the Abraham Accords end today, or is this tough talk before a massive Arab concession? Democrat Socialists of America continue to compete to see who can create the most gaffes before the general election. Angie Nixon says she is for reparations, and even on CNN, they are admitting that the DSA policies will end up costing Americans more. Can Democrats remove these bad apples in time? And Trump says to Michael Cohen that there would be no Israel without Donald Trump. We will discuss if that's harmful rhetoric or helpful for him. Finally, I warned if we didn't stigmatize Lindsay Clancy, there would be an epidemic of vigilante justice style violence. 24 hours later, unfortunately, I already have evidence for my claim. Tonight, on God Bless America, I am your humble host, Eric Abbenante, comedian, producer, documentarian. I am here live in Dallas, Texas, Friday, August 21st, 2026, and we have quite the show to get to tonight. But first, it is Friday, and every single week, I bring you, once a week, the plants for my backyard. These are not fake plants, okay? These are, and not only are these plants, I made these plants, okay? I'm greener than you, libs. I actually create plants. I cloned these. That's that over there. Man, I am great at this. That right there. Let's see. Right here. I'm killing it. That's a pomegranate. Then over here, that's a mulberry. Oh my God. Stage left, stage right is just beyond my brain today, apparently. But I am so excited. Yes, those are clones, and this is the final episode until we hit Sunday. So we are done for the week. We do these shows every 8 p.m. and then bonus episodes at 6 a.m. We had a couple of those this week. And yesterday I had an opening salvo on Lindsay Clancy, and the case was so disturbing, and I have learned more, and that now I have to dive into it again today. So essentially, we have a double feature. We're going to do two features because we got to talk about the Iran war, the joint statement from all those, like practically every Arab nation you could think of aside from Syria and Lebanon, the Arab nations currently occupied by other Arab nations, yes, those and Iran, those are going to be your non-committing groups, but pretty much every other Arab/Muslim nation joined in on this call to essentially end the Abraham Accords with Israel. So we will be getting into that. But first, we got to get into our opening feature, Lindsay Clancy. And I had told you that the crux of the Lindsay Clancy situation was that if we do not stigmatize this justified violence, we will see an epidemic of said vigilante justice style violence. And unfortunately, I hate to be right, but I'm already right. Less than 24 hours later, and we will get to that. But first, for those of you who don't know this story very well, and I was like you less than 24 hours ago. I was not very much concerned with this story, and then it popped up and it became the topic du jour. And sometimes these topic du jours, they are not truly important, but this one I feel is reflective of so many different things, and I am able to pull up some historical precedents of postpartum depression that we were not able to pull up last time, and so we have a full analysis of this. But I guess the way to start this is that women, and I love you, obviously, born by a woman, definitely love women. I am going to give you some advice tonight, women, because, oh my God, women in this country across the nation are looking terrible because of this Lindsay Clancy case. And I don't want all women to be reflected negatively upon this case, but as we were looking at the defenders of Lindsay Clancy, the supporters of Lindsay Clancy, I couldn't find a single male. If we went through the group of all those in pink shirts, it seemed to be all females. And then I researched this even more, and the origins of her supporters, Lindsay's Army of Love, were a group of female nurses. And so I feel like I need to get into why this is such an important case for women in particular, and why, unfortunately, I feel like this is a turning point in feminism for the negative forever in this country. But for those of you who don't know the story, Lindsay Clancy back in 2023, January of 2023, asked her husband, Patrick Clancy, to pick up dinner and their children's medicine order. So he goes out, and less than an hour later, as he returns, he found Lindsay semi-conscious in the backyard, having her neck and her wrists cut, and after throwing herself from her bedroom window, she laid there paralyzed. That's where Patrick found her, partially paralyzed, and his 3 children murdered by Lindsay in a fit of postpartum depression. She used an exercise band to strangle her children individually for multiple minutes. I mean, just think about the horror of that. You have to take an exercise band and actually cut off the breathing pathway for your 5-year-old child, then your 3-year-old child, then your 8th-month child. And do you know that, like, in that time period, when you are doing the strangulation, that must have been the longest multiple minutes of that woman's life. And she was still able to pull this off. That is a level of psychosis that is hard to comprehend. But then the really hard part to comprehend is there are always going to be acts of evil, acts of violence that occur, but one would think that society would at least understand who the victims were and who the culprit was, and to shame the culprit to the point where this doesn't happen further in society. And hopefully the perpetrator of the crime actually receives a punishment that would deter others from doing same said crime. Life in prison, execution, etc. But none of that is seemingly happening at the moment. In fact, what happened was Patrick Clancy, the husband, he has been vilified far more so than the wife who actually killed her kids. And especially from these same feminists that I am trying to give advice to tonight. Because if you continue down this path, there are reasonable men who are going to look at the women of this country and say, we need to change the rights that they have. Now, I'm here to defend you, ladies, but I'm telling you, on the right, I know many men who have been pushing the repeal the 19th Amendment movement for a while. And this is actually one of the great examples of why you would do this, but I am still going to defend women in the sense of it doesn't have to reflect upon all women, except for the fact that the people defending her, it does seem like it's all the women you know, all the feminists you know. And so that is what is tough about this. It's very tough to discuss because it doesn't seem like we are stigmatizing this woman at all. In fact, we are celebrating her. And this is where the victim mentality of the left and of feminism has truly gone too far. And we've seen this through, frankly, the oppressor-oppressed lens that they take everything through. And so it is very easy to see how Patrick Clancy, straight white male, somehow gets vilified more than the woman who, if you go by the oppressor-oppressed paradigm, she is a woman, he is a man, he is a straight white male, therefore he is the oppressor and he must be the bad guy, which is part of why it was so disturbing to see how much money had been raised. Yesterday, it was $750,000 last time I checked. Now it is well over $1 million. Well over $1 million that was raised for the support of Lindsay Clancy. Yes, the same woman who murdered her 3 children with her, and it's not like she used a gun or a knife. It was a very intimate way of killing somebody. It wasn't a cold, detached version of murder. It was as intimate as you can get with murder, as close to literal strangulation with your hands as you can get. And so I warned last episode that this illogical justification of violence would spread like an epidemic. And unfortunately, less than 24 hours later, I have already been proven right on my claim. So I got to say, why are we seeing this? Because not only was there a lack of stigmatization, but we saw a massive incentive for this. $1 million. Back in my day, not to sound like an old millennial here, an elder millennial, but back in my day, to get $1 million, you had to do something like win American Idol. Now, America's Idol killed her 3 children. And that's how she became a lionized, glorified person within these feminist circles. And it is getting to the point where it is hard to relate to said feminism, I must say. And I will use the history of postpartum depression to describe why this was the O.J. Simpson moment for women and feminism in this country. And I will be using famous cases like Andrea Yates, Casey Anthony, and of course the aforementioned Lindsay Clancy. And again, if you are getting upset at my characterization of who is supporting Lindsay Clancy, well, just go and look at the groups of people who were out there publicly supporting Lindsay Clancy. Try and find me a man, and also try and find me a woman of color. Now, there were a couple in the groups, but they are like, where's Waldo? It is hard to find. So, especially with white women, I must say, who have more bought into the third wave feminism stuff, because they are more being brainwashed effectively in colleges across this country. This is where we need to really analyze the effects of feminism on our country, because this is getting to the point of, because she is a woman in general, we must support her over the husband who one would think would be the victim here, and or the children who were murdered. But somehow we have warped it into she is the victim. She is the victim. And again, try and find me anyone in the manosphere who rallies to the defense of a man murdering his entire family, which does happen, but it is not incentivized. It is certainly stigmatized, and no one rallies to their defense. No one makes them famous. No one gives them $1 million. No one makes excuses for them. They're just crazy losers who did what they did. So find me the manosphere equivalent of supporting murder of your child. And who is supporting this woman? Well, none other than Candace Owens. Yes, the always on the wrong side of everything, Candace Owens, who is a provocateur, an instigator professionally, who is seeking out attention for having the most reprehensible views. So it's not shocking that she is on this side of it. But I must say, even I was shocked to hear Candace Owens say that it is the fault of the drugs and the doctors who gave those drugs to Lindsay Clancy, not Lindsay Clancy herself. And if you want to review Candace's list of who's a good woman, a good mother, and who isn't a good mother, let's review. So, bad mother, that's Erica Kirk. She took over TPUSA after her husband was murdered. Live in front of everybody. Candace thinks that Erica Kirk is a bad mother. Meanwhile, Lindsay Clancy, who murdered her 3 children, not a bad mother, according to Candace Owens. She blames the doctors, the pills, the Jews, I'm sure, are going to be in there somewhere. And, of course, probably the French Foreign Legion, Egypt, etc. Blames all of those things, correct? But certainly can't be the woman who perpetrated this act. No, it couldn't possibly. So, just like the Charlie Kirk situation, don't believe your lying eyes, okay? Even though that Tyler Robinson is on camera committing the act, even though he admitted to it in court, even though Lindsay Clancy admitted to what she did in court, no, don't believe your lying eyes. It wasn't Lindsay Clancy. It wasn't Tyler Robinson. It was these outside forces. It was the drugs. It was the Jews. So we got a lot to get into just on that one topic. We got a lot to get into. And then obviously going to cover that joint statement from practically every Muslim nation, how they are against Israel's occupation of the West Bank. And because of that, they want to essentially end the Abraham Accords. And is this going to amount to anything? Or is it just bluster before they make a massive concession? Because if you look at the history of the Arab world, all the Muslim nations, when it comes to Palestine, they talk a big game. But when it comes to the actions portion, if you pay attention to their actions, they rarely ever do anything for the Palestinians. In fact, the actions you see from Egypt and Jordan is put up a big wall, as big of a border wall as we can muster. By the way, let's put some barbed wire on top of said border wall because we want to make sure those Palestinians are as far away from us as possible and have no chance to be able to get past that wall. So, is this statement going to amount to anything? Are they actually going to do something about it? Doubt it. But we'll get into all that. And, of course, we are going to get into the Donald Trump of it all, him talking about how without him, there would be no Israel, him talking to Michael Cohen about that. Michael Cohen mentioning Saudi Arabia, which maybe he listens to this program because we have talked about that numerous times, how everyone talks about the clean break memo, how we've attacked every single nation Israel wanted us to attack in that clean break memo. Well, actually, if you include Venezuela, we have attacked every nation that Saudi Arabia has wanted us to attack to make them the preeminent OPEC power. Venezuela is an OPEC, and so actually it's a cleaner examination than the clean break memo if you include all of that. And so Saudi Arabia is, in my opinion, even more of a dominant force in American politics, and they have much better PR. Just like we were talking about with Turkey, how Turkey has great PR because they're currently occupying 3 separate nations, Cyprus, Syria, Iraq, and yet not a peep, not 1/1,000,000th of a peep compared to the occupation Israel is currently undergoing in the West Bank and Gaza. And very small portions of Syria and Lebanon compared to what Turkey is doing in Syria and Iraq, but still very similar. So we have a lot to get into. But first, before I dive into our feature story, Lindsay Clancy, I have never done this before. I'm going to start doing it every episode after the opening salvos. Please subscribe, smash the like button, and comment your favorite portion of the episode or your least favorite portion, something you want to challenge me on. I read every single comment at the end of the show. And I have good comments that I need to read at the end of this, so we will get to all those. All right. Now, without further ado, let's get into the show. So, Lindsay Clancy, this, like I said, for those of you who just joined the show, Lindsay Clancy, if you were not aware, in 2023, asked her husband to go out to the store to get some food for the kids and some medicine for the kids. Well, the medicine for the kids was pointless in the end because when he came back after getting the food and the medicine, less than an hour later, what happens? He comes back to find his wife with slit wrists, slit neck, and partially paralyzed, and his 3 kids were completely strangulated. Technically, one of them was partially alive. They flew that kid to the hospital, died on the way. So she successfully killed all 3 of her children. And again, the normal reaction to this in a healthy society is, okay, we are going to lock her up, most likely execute her after she goes through the due process of a court of law to corroborate and confirm that she committed these acts. But it would be a pretty much open and shut case with almost 0% chance of exoneration. And the husband would be seen as the victim. And of course, the children would be seen as the victims here. But instead, because we are not in a healthy society, but a society that has been warped by feminism, warped by these woke politics that I would describe as the oppression color chart, if you are a white person, you are bad. If you are a male, even worse. Heterosexual, 3 strikes, you're out. Ugh. And that is why oftentimes you see this galvanizing behind brown criminals, female criminals, other religious criminals, whereas a white male who is a heterosexual who is the victim of this is still being suspected with 0 evidence, just off of feelings, fifis. Oh, maybe he is the reason for this. Maybe he drove her to this. He's the bad guy. And this is where society has jumped the shark. Okay? This is where you know you are not in a healthy society when this is said reaction to a triple homicide of your children. One of the most disgusting acts. And what is remarkable, even in the article, let me pull up this article. This is from The New Yorker by Aaron Orby, 2024. This happened in 2023. The case is coming up in court right now in the year of our Lord 2026. And so it is coming back to the prominence, but I just want you to read or hear how this was posed in the article because it floored me. Tabloids reprinted Facebook pictures in which she cradled her baby bump or posed with the kids along with a picket fence. Internet sleuths turned up a message from a web forum where she sought advice for postpartum anxiety and depression. As legal and medical experts have noted, women who kill their children tend to be portrayed as either mad or bad. Yeah. Women who kill their children, no matter what, should be portrayed as mad or bad. Call me insensitive. Call me a Luddite. Call me a caveman. Guess what? I don't care. As legal and medical experts have noted, women who kill their children tend to be portrayed as either mad or bad. Yeah, no duh. This is akin to when they threw the shoe at George W. Bush and the media had the audacity to say, in their culture, throwing shoes is an insult. Well, newsflash, there is no culture where throwing shoes is not an insult. So this is pointless. So saying that, oh, women who kill their children are portrayed as mad or bad, that is not a profound point. That is one of the most obvious, it is clearly that is going to be the outcome. There is going to be no other outcome. And it doesn't matter how much society progresses. I would dare say that's a regression of society. When were human sacrifices considered to be positive? At the tail end of the Mayan Empire as it's collapsing. Okay? When you kill your children, we will compare you to spiders, praying mantis, and bears. We will compare you to insects, reptiles, vicious animals. We don't see the humanity in you when you kill your children for a reason. And to show you how much society has changed on this topic, we don't need to go very far back. We can stay in this century. And shout out to my beautiful mother who mentioned this case to me, Andrea Yates. And I do remember this case as a kid because, let's bring her up. This is Andrea Yates. And her kids. Oh, sorry. Well, didn't pull. There you go. So here's Andrea Yates. And this woman killed her kids in a fit of postpartum depression. I believe 5 children. I could see 4. So we're going to say 4 for now. But she killed her children as well. And do you know how society reacted? I'm going to shock you. Andrea Yates was vilified. She was considered a bad mother because this was in the year 2000 when the third wave feminism hadn't taken over and we were going to justify everything that women do. And again, if you have a problem with that characterization, find me men who support killing their whole family and rallying behind a man like that. Find me any men in general who support Lindsay Clancy. Find me non-white women at the rallies, with these pink shirts. So this is definitely a change in society. Andrea Yates was vilified. And then Casey Anthony, the next prominent case, was vilified, but you started to see some of the degradation of society creep in. Oh, she's kind of hot. What? No. Disgusting. There's nothing attractive about having a praying mantis spouse who will eat the young. Ugh. Disgusting. And so, again, this is, to me, a reflection of society's degradation. If we can't vilify this woman, and the fact that even in the article, did you know that women who kill their children are typically seen as negative in a male-dominated patriarchal society? I would dare say any society that vilifies women who kill their children is a healthy society. And any society that has a group of people rallying to this woman's defense is an unhealthy society. Again, call me a caveman. I'd rather be unga bunga. Doing little paintings in my cave, in my man cave. Would much rather be that than considered whatever this progressive is. I do not understand how we could possibly say anything positive about her. And again, okay, let's go back to what I had said on prior episodes, that this is the slippery slope of the abortion argument. How we had said in the 90s, I had praised Bill Clinton for at least stating that abortions should be rare and focus on the exceptions. Now, just a week ago, we had Governor Maura Healey of Massachusetts sign a bill allowing abortion up to the day of birth, which back in the 90s was used by Republicans as an example of the slippery slope argument. If you allow abortion now, they will allow abortions to be done up to the day of birth. And the Bill Clinton Democrats of the time were like, that's crazy. That'll never happen. It's just going to be for the rare and the exceptions. And then smash cut to, we can have an abortion of all the way up to day of birth. And for those who are trying to say, that bill is just for the exceptions, it's just like what Bill Clinton was saying. Well, actually, no, because there are many women who have reported that they are completely healthy and they could still have an abortion. It has nothing to do with the exceptions, and under that law, they can take advantage of that. So, no, it is actually completely different. It is the opposite of that. And this is what happens when you allow that argument to fester instead of shaming it at the proper time, stigmatizing it at the proper time. Now we are incentivizing it. We have companies that will pay for you to cross state lines to get an abortion up to the day of birth. So why wouldn't women think, oh, well, if I can have a first, second, or third trimester abortion, why couldn't I have a 33rd trimester abortion? And that is what we saw with Lindsay Clancy. She represented the past birth abortion, the 33rd, 23rd, 13th trimester abortion. Wow. And we got to think about, okay, where else have we seen this argument? This generic vigilante style justification of your violence. Where have we seen this before? Oh, remember Luigi Mangione in New York? And I mentioned this last episode, but you remember Luigi Mangione. He was stating that because of his back pain and his denial of health care to fix said back pain, he deserved to murder a healthcare CEO. How that relates is hard for anyone with logic to understand, but once you enter this oppressor-oppressed paradigm where, again, we can justify any violence because you're a white heterosexual male in a patriarchal society, then this is where we see society going to. I mean, this is disgusting. And the funny thing is for Luigi Mangione, when he is saying, oh, we need to be able to kill people for access to health care. Well, let me show you this story, buddy. Oh, we need to have access to health care at all times. And oh God, I am showing a mortal enemy. The guy who's stolen from me more than anybody. So ignore the guy who actually is doing this clip. Scumbag. But, okay. Multiple patients at a Nashville hospital are paralyzed after staff accidentally gave them the wrong drugs. Wow. So Luigi Mangione wanted access to that same healthcare system that paralyzed multiple people, because the third largest killer of people in this country is what? Medical malpractice. So that is the type of healthcare system that Luigi Mangione feels like he should be able to kill into. And again, this is the lack of logic we are seeing in this third wave feminist society, this DEI society, this BLM society, where we can just justify any form of violence afterward. And if we don't stigmatize it, if we end up incentivizing it the way we do with $1 million raised, well, what do you expect? What do you expect the result is going to be? In fact, it's surprising that this doesn't happen more, unfortunately. And that brings me to another example that fits into this justification of violence. Do you remember the case of Carmelo Anthony murdering his the track meet mate? I don't know if he's a classmate, but track meet mate of Austin Metcalf. He murdered Austin Metcalf. And what was the response? Hundreds of thousands of dollars raised for his legal defense. He was incentivized to do the murder. Wow, that's loud. Now, this is not for Lindsay Clancy because you see women of color in the audience. Now, this is purely tribal. This young gentleman murdered a young gentleman by the name of Austin Metcalf. Why they are supporting him, one would say, who knows? Well, actually, we do know why, and I can bring you back to the OJ case for why this is happening. The OJ Simpson case and I actually realized that there are enough Gen Z out there who really don't know any history that preceded them, where I do have to explain what OJ Simpson is. In my era, it was such a explained portion of what you call like boomer history that for me, this is a locked in concept. But I've met enough Gen Z over the years who don't know anything that precedes them. What's Aladdin? Oh my God. Okay, thanks for making me feel old as hell. So, what is going on is very similar to the O.J. Simpson case. O.J. Simpson was a very famous football player from USC and was able to parlay that into the Buffalo Bills. He was able to use his career to get into film and TV, was even in the Naked Gun series with Leslie Nielsen, which I know Gen Z has no knowledge of, but those were big comedy movies at the time. I was going to say very similar to Austin Powers, but I'm realizing even that is too far back for Gen Z. Similar to Drewski, I guess. I don't have a lot of things I can grab onto from Gen Z where you guys can compare it to, but think of OJ Simpson like I show Speed. A guy's Speed, I see, okay? Think of him like Speed, but we found out Speed murdered his wife, okay? And then that case became this racial metric where you end up seeing a split screen of white people and black people and having a disparate reaction to O.J. Simpson getting a not guilty verdict. The black people in the split screen, they were cheering like they were given the not guilty plea, or it was O.J. like they were in O.J. Simpson's family. And then white people were wholly disappointed, angry, and frustrated at the lack of justice system and probably felt like, oh, you are incentivizing more murders to occur, more people to justify the violence. I believe the justification of violence for O.J. Simpson on Nicole Brown, his ex-wife, was that she had slept with another football player, Marcus Allen, and he had actually witnessed this, and so he had decided to murder her. Now, I am certainly not condoning the acts of Nicole Brown cheating on O.J. Simpson, but I am certainly also not saying that cheating can allow you to commit cold-blooded murder. Okay? See how, as a male, I am not rushing to the defense of O.J. Simpson because what he did was evil. Even if she committed those terrible acts with his brother or his father, I'm trying to think of to make it as twisted as possible. It's still, there is no justification for murder. There's no way that O.J. Simpson can depict himself as the victim when he was the perpetrator of the crime. And I'm sorry, there is nothing that he could do where I would feel sorry for him. Now, I wish women had that same viewpoint towards Miss Lindsay Clancy. even though she had postpartum depression, and it is terrible to feel said feelings. Nothing justifies the murder of children, because once women and mothers start murdering their children, we have lost a society, haven't we? We are losing the future, and there is no way that society could progress with said results. So, part of why I described it as the O.J. Simpson moment for women is because the rest of society is looking at the group celebrating this and celebrating her, and we are disappointed, and we are disgusted, and we are looking at said group and saying, instead of doing the proper thing of stigmatizing and shaming someone from your own community who committed a terrible act, you're celebrating said person just because they're from your community. And the O.J. Simpson case certainly did not help racial relations in this country. And it divided us further. And this is what you're going to see from this Lindsay Clancy case. I feel divided from any women in my life who are feminists, who have these progressive viewpoints. Today, I feel further away from them than I ever have. It is going to be harder for me to relate to said women because of this case. It is so disturbing. Again, she could have murdered the children. Evil happens all the time. It's society's reaction to the monsters, frankly, these horrific acts. And even accidents. Sometimes there are accidents in this category that still need to be treated this way. Yet, we are treating the husband as if he did something wrong. We need to get a grip as a nation. And this story is beyond horrifying. And I just thank God that my wife does not sympathize with this woman, because I don't know what I would do if my wife had been one of the women sympathizing with this woman. Now, you're going to be like, Eric, you're making this up. No, it is a trend. Let's see if I can find it, because I swear I had it saved. But there is a trend of, I believe it's same Lindsay, saying, oh, I felt the same way as you. Me Too, Lindsay. Oh, my God. Not a good addition to the Me Too movement, by the way, which was in many ways mocked for being ineffective, and actually this whole believe all women notion was seemed to be quite faulty, because a lot of women actually were justifying a rape accusation because they just felt regret from a sexual encounter. And yes, there are a lot of these that actually were genuine rapes. Obviously, like, Jeffrey Epstein's Island, for instance, those are genuine. But there were a lot of these Me Too's that were actually just attacks on men. One of the more prominent ones I remember was Aziz Ansari, who had a bad date situation, and he was now in the Me Too movement. I remember the creator of Community told a staff member that he loved her. Didn't make any moves beyond that, but she considered it a Me Too because I can't know at my work if you actually like what I'm doing or you just have a crush on me. I got Me Too'd. He didn't even make a pass at her. This is how beta he was, and he still got Me Too'd in the height of the Me Too movement. So this Me Too Lindsay, disturbing. And there's a lot of them. There's one that was a woman who had said in 4 different ways, should I put the baby under the water? Should I strangle the baby? Should I just put a pillow on the baby? It was horrific what is going on, and how social media is also incentivizing this. And I certainly do put some of the blame on social media, society, big pharma, blah, blah, blah. All those things can be done. But if we are not forcing men and women to take personal accountability on subjects like these, we are only going to see more and more. And let's just play this really quick.
I'm trying to take care of the kids. I'm drowning.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to get copyright infringement. So, okay. Just that in and of itself, the fact she's saying me too, Lindsay, and all these different things with the baby. I mean, and I got to say, women, it's not that hard to be a stay-at-home mom. In fact, some would say not only is it the greatest job, but it is one of the easiest. I cook. I clean around here. It ain't that hard. And it may not be as fulfilling as being a race car driver. It may not provide the thrills of jumping out of an airplane. It may not provide the riches and the attention of being a professional athlete, but being a stay-at-home mom is the greatest job anyone can have in reality. It is raising the next generation. And especially for women, there is no higher ideal that you can reach. So the fact that we have stigmatized being a good mother, but incentivized murdering your children in multiple ways, including through abortion, we have reached peak feminism, and we are going to get to a point of reckoning for these feminist ideals. And we really did hit the O.J. Simpson moment for a lot of women. Now, to go back to the O.J. Simpson situation, O.J. Simpson had a famous moment with his lawyer. And his lawyer, oh my God, I am spacing on the lawyer. It's so famous too. I feel like I am Gen Z with my lack of knowledge. Johnny Cochran, duh. Okay. Johnny Cochran had the famous moment in the trial. Puts on the glove. If it don't fit, you must acquit. Well, now, at this point, third wave feminism, we had a female Johnny Cochran moment, essentially, where all the women in society got together and said, Lindsay Clancy, if she has tits, you must acquit. No, that's not how it works. It doesn't matter that she was a woman. It matters that she killed her kids, regardless of what portion of society you're in. Killing your kids as a mother is wrong. It is not a sign of progress that, again, we saw a New Yorker article that they are stating, well, as legal and medical experts have noted, women who kill their children tend to be portrayed as either mad or bad. Yes, they should. That is the sign of a healthy society. The sign of a disturbed society is when we don't portray women who kill their children as mad or bad. Why? Because if we don't, they will continue to do it. Seems basic. Seems like a no-brainer. But in this era of the woke, the third wave feminism, the same people who told you that men can get pregnant, well, if men can get pregnant, then we're allowed to talk about postpartum depression, can't we? Right? If men can get pregnant, then we're allowed to talk about postpartum depression as if we have been pregnant 100 times. Oh, wait. So you're going to have to now pick feminists, you're going to have to pick one. And good. Either men can't talk about postpartum depression or men can get pregnant. You're going to have to pick one. Or as the great Johnny Cochran said, if you have tits, you must acquit. So this to me is, I felt like when I first read it, this is just gossip fodder. But the more I looked into it, it is beyond reflective of the society that we're in. Now, I found an example of a... Oh, okay. Here's one of the examples I wanted to show you guys. Here's a man who killed his 3 young sons for God. Now, here's the difference. His name is Chad Dorman. Also, evil monster, the same level as Lindsay Clancy. But guess what? He has nobody supporting him. Interesting. He doesn't have a mob of men rushing to his defense, trying to justify his violence. He is a abject loser. He is being shamed properly. Should be getting the death penalty, just like Lindsay Clancy. So this is a marker of where society is at currently. And it's not good. It doesn't reflect well upon us. It is disturbing. Now, the other thing I wanted to see is I found another example of what I was talking about with that woman and how there were others. And if I can't find it now, I'm going to be so annoyed. Now, okay, here's another example that does relate to what we're talking about. Very similar. So, California mother is headed to federal prison for 3 years after trying to stop her teenage son from transitioning. So, protecting a male son from destroying his genitals, she's bad. She needs to go to jail. But the mother who killed her 3 children, she's good. She's a good mom. We need to protect her. This is the level of insanity that we are going through as a nation, and it is mostly because of the woke agenda justifying things and inverting reality. Men can get pregnant is an inversion of reality. Carmelo Anthony didn't murder his children, or didn't murder Austin Metcalf. Is an inversion of reality. Now, interesting thing. Okay, I found it. This is a woman in North Carolina who killed her 3-year-old son and attempted to kill her 2-year-old son. And what? She is not guilty by reason of insanity, is what she's claiming. And her attorney says she had a mental break with reality due to postpartum psychosis. Oh. And her name is Faust. What's the first name? Andrea Faust. Now, she is just an example of, she might have seen this story of Lindsay Clancy and saw, I kill my kids, I'll get $1 million and society will love me. That's way better than what I'm doing now. Is how she, in her insane mind, was feeling it. So, because we didn't stigmatize Lindsay Clancy, but we incentivized her, here are the results right here. We're seeing more and more. And what is going to stop a new generation of mothers across this nation from committing vigilante justice on their children for having certain emotions? And I understand that the Big Pharma has exacerbated this problem, but a lot of you who are saying that were shutting us up during 2020 when we were talking about Big Pharma being corrupt, exacerbating problems. Notice how that never gets mentioned, does it? Very interesting. So, Lindsay Clancy, these things do happen, but our reaction as a society will determine whether it continues to happen or we shame it to the point where it is a rarity like Andrea Yates. To bring it back to Andrea Yates, she had an opportunity to get out of jail. She chose to stay in jail. Why? Because she felt like she was a threat to society and she was safer in jail. And to be fair, back in her day, she was probably stigmatized and vilified so much that she didn't want to go out in the public. But Andrea Yates and Casey Anthony, if they happened today, they would be celebrated. They would not be vilified. And that's the most disturbing portion of this. And this is why it is so hard to relate to Democrat women. And I don't want to make it political, but it is clearly dividing on political lines. And it makes me sad because this whole show is about bridging the gap. I try and make it so that we understand that Democrats, they most of the time agree what the problem is, but their solution is off. This is a complete separation of what we think the problem is and what they think the problem is at this point. They think the problem was Patrick Clancy and a society that experts have noted will depict women who kill their children and portray them as mad or bad. That's what they think the problem is. And how do we move forward together in society this way? I don't know. The only way is if we can come together and say, killing kids is bad. But there's a lot of abortion activists who will have to eat some crow there. And that is why this is tough and why I do feel like it clearly falls under political lines. And again, this show is trying to bridge the gap and make it so that Democrats and Republicans can relate to each other more. This story is disheartening because I don't know how to do it. I'm supposed to provide you their version of the argument. Hey, if you understood postpartum depression, then you would what? Say that it's okay to murder children? I don't know how to frame their side of the argument honestly to where you could even come close to justifying what she did. I don't know how to get there. I don't think it's possible. And I'm sorry, if you have to twist yourself into a pretzel and blame medical and legal experts for portraying women who kill their children as mad or bad, you've lost the argument and you've lost the plot. And we've talked about this for an hour. So maybe I should move on because it's getting me angry, clearly. I'm getting agitated and my hands are getting progressively more Italian as we go. So Let me stop there. But look into Andrea Yates, look into Casey Anthony, look how the media portrayed them and how different it is from now. And this was still the 21st century. We're not going back that far. We need to figure out what has happened in this country before we have a true reckoning. We might be undergoing it right now. Okay. That got me angry. I'm sorry. I know my beautiful mother would never do that to me, obviously. So I'm very lucky that I had great parents who would never do that. So, okay. Now to our next subject. And this is massive. This is, I would say, the most underrated story of the day in terms of this could have been and should have been number one, but a woman killed her kids and society's reaction to it was so insane, I had to do 2 features on it. I feel like the second one was good, though. I feel like that was actually well done by me, and I almost never say that about myself. So, okay. This is a joint statement, and like I said, this is pretty much every Muslim nation that is important. Aside from Syria and Lebanon, really, you're going to be hard pressed to find the power players in the Arab world who are not involved in this. So let's go to the map. You know, it's an episode of God Bless America, so we go to the map, okay? We do that every episode. So let's list off the countries that are involved. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, I believe Iraq was one of them, right? Not Iraq. Okay, so Iraq's not on the list. Qatar is on the list. Qatar right here is on the list. Indonesia, one of the largest Muslim nations in the world. Indonesia. And then Pakistan, the Muslim nuclear power. Right there. Pakistan and India both have nukes. India, the only nation in the world to develop nukes without any outside help. And that includes Israel, who has a nuclear program that is not acknowledged. So it is funny how we are saying Iran cannot have a nuclear program, but you know, Israel, yeah, it does have a nuclear program, but we aren't going to acknowledge it. They are grandfathered in, despite the fact that, yes, they stole some of the technology from the United States. So, okay. And then Turkey and Egypt. So, Turkey, million-man army, historically through the Ottoman Empire, a very strong military nation. And, of course, Egypt, the first Arab nation to backstab the rest of them after the Khartoum Declaration. What was the Khartoum Declaration? After 1967, the Six-Day War, all the Arab nations got together, butthurt, and they were like, no, the 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no negotiation with Israel, no recognition of Israel. And then after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Egypt was able to regain the Sinai in exchange for an American bribe via foreign aid to not attack Israel. And Israel may be the number 1 in foreign aid from the United States, but Egypt's basically always been number 2, and it is because of said bribe. Don't attack. And so Egypt is the backstabber. Pakistan is the nuclear power. Turkey has the actual army that can really do some damage. And then you have Saudi Arabia, which just is always saying, cha-ching, cha-ching. They are loaded, just like the UAE. Saudi Arabia, as we have mentioned, 1945, FDR gets on a boat with the with the Saudi leader at the time. His last name was Saud. And bam, we promised them in perpetuity to protect Saudi Arabia forever, in perpetuity, as long as you give us oil. So a lot of different Arab nations are in this joint statement. And what does this joint statement say? I'm going to read to you every word because it is that important. And yes, this has been translated to English. The website originally looked like this, but through the power of the internet, I have the translation. The foreign ministers of the United Arab Emirates, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Republic of Indonesia, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the Republic of Turkey, and the Arab Republic of Egypt expressed their unequivocal condemnation of Israel's continued illegal settlement policies in the occupied Palestinian territory and their complete rejection of the E1 settlement plan and related settlement activities in occupied East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem, also known as the West Bank. And if you're not familiar with the E1 portion of that, well, luckily I got this CNN article from yesterday that describes that for you. So, the E1 settlement project would connect Jerusalem to the Israeli settlement of Male Adumim. And I am certainly mispronouncing that, making a future Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem and in a potential two-state solution virtually impossible. Now, we can see the map right here, and this is the E1 area where if the settlements in this area continue, that would essentially block out the possibility of a second state having their capital in East Jerusalem. And the real response to this is, man, should have taken the 3 separate peace deals in the 20th century or the 3 separate peace deals in the 21st century that would have provided you the full West Bank, the full Gaza Strip, and other portions of Israel. But because you didn't accept the deal, as is famously said, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Because of that, you have nothing. Good day, sir. You have nothing. So, that is the E1 portion of that. Let's go back to the joint statement. They also reiterate their condemnation of the violations and acts of violence perpetrated by settlers with the support of the Israeli occupation authorities against the Palestinian people and their property. They affirm that these practices in no way diminish the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, constitute violations of international law and relevant United Nations resolutions, and represent a serious threat to regional and international peace and security. Now, Jordan and Egypt, they border Israel, so they're gonna want to bring in the Palestinians, right? They'll welcome them with open arms. Hell no. You don't know what it's like for them. See, the Egyptians have a very strong border right here. Imagine that, a border wall. Wouldn't that be nice, America? And then a very strong border wall here in Jordan. Why? Because the Palestinians invaded Jordan, invaded Lebanon, and when the refugees were allowed into Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon and Syria, what did they do? The Palestinians who were let in, based on the generosity of those host nations, well, they returned the favor by committing violence, being welfare babies, and citing Marxist principles to seize private property, such as cars and buildings. It'd be one thing if you're just taking sticks of gum. But no, we're going to go for the biggest stuff we can find. So, honestly, there is a constant use by the Arab world and Iran. Yes, Iran is not Arabian. They are Persian. So, Iran, they have certainly used the Palestinians to insert themselves back into the Arab world and get some goodwill among the other Arab nations, because Iran has a superiority complex within this region and sees themselves as better than the rest of the Arab nations, which is why they don't even see themselves as an Arab nation, that they see themselves as Persian. So they have always seen themselves as better, and so the only way that they can connect to the Arab world and have any alliances is through the Palestinian cause. And many Arab nations do the same thing. They use the Palestinians, they to the point of abuse, but they are not going to come and help. So this statement is cute, but they ain't going to do anything. They ain't going to do anything about this. This is a statement that you make right before you capitulate, bend over, or completely disrespect the Palestinians. The Palestinians, I do have sympathy for. The people I certainly have sympathy for, even though they did in majority vote for either Hamas or Fatah. And we have covered Fatah in the Iranian proxy series, the history of Fatah, PLO, and Yasser Arafat. And we are coming up on the Houthis portion of the Iranian proxy series, coming up this Sunday. But Hamas will be the next installment after the Houthis. And Hamas end up winning the election that time. But either way, but the Palestinians voted vast majority for Fatah or Hamas in the 2000s. I believe it was 2006 or 2008. Well, they haven't had an election since. That is a common consequence of voting for a terrorist group to run your nation. So, yeah. Now, the ministers warn that the E1 settlement plan constitutes a dangerous escalation that would further settlement expansion and annexation, undermining the territorial contiguity of the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly between the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This threatens the viability of an independent, contiguous, and viable Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. These actions directly challenge international efforts to achieve peace, including President Donald Trump's comprehensive peace plan, which explicitly rejects annexation and forced displacement, as well as the mechanisms envisaged for its implementation, including through the Peace Council. They also challenge President Trump's firm commitment to preventing the annexation of the West Bank in order to achieve stability and end the conflict. Now, President Trump has also said what I've said, which is the Palestinians better take a deal soon, or they will inevitably be shipped off to Jordan, which is the original Palestinian state. King Hussein very many times reiterated this fact that Jordan is the original Palestinian state and Jordanians have the strongest connection to the Palestinians, which is why the Palestinians were so kind to the Jordanians. Oh, wait, the Palestinians invaded Jordan and tried to take their property and tried to assassinate their leader, King Hussein, numerous times, even though he did feel guilty for the Six-Day War loss. Great way to return the favor to that generous person. So, the ministers reaffirmed that the two-state solution, in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions, remains the only viable path to achieving a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace. They warned that actions aimed at undermining this solution would further escalate tensions, threaten regional and international peace and security, and jeopardize the prospects for achieving lasting peace and stability in the region. In this context, the ministers support all efforts to ensure accountability, including through appropriate international measures and sanctions against entities and individuals responsible for illegal settlement activities, including the E1 settlement plan, as well as those who support, facilitate, or implement settlement expansion and annexation policies. They also call for an end to support or funding that contributes to the establishment, expansion, or entrenchment of illegal settlements. They emphasize that the absence of accountability contributes to the continuation of violations and further undermines the prospects for a just and comprehensive peace. So, let me just finish it. The ministers call for immediate action to halt the E1 settlement plan, rescind all measures taken within its framework, and cease all settlement activities and other measures aimed at altering the geographic and demographic character of the occupied Palestinian territory. They also call upon the United Nations Security Council and all relevant states and international bodies to assume their responsibilities under international law and take urgent and effective measures to halt illegal settlement expansion, ensure the protection of the Palestinian people, and safeguard their inalienable rights, including their right to self-determination and the realization of their independent state in accordance with international law and relevant United Nations resolutions. So that sounds cute, but what's hypocritical about that? Well, cease all settlement activities and other measures aimed at altering the geographic and demographic character of the occupied Palestinian territory. Well, when those same Arab nations had many Jews living in their land, well, did they protect the demographic character of the Jews and the Christians? No, they charged a jizya tax, which is a mafia-like tax of you are paying for a protection fee. In other words, you are paying because we are so generous, the Arab people, that we haven't killed you. And because we haven't killed you, you have to pay a tax. And they have stated that that tax is explicitly to force conversions of the Christian and Arab nation, Christian and Jewish people within the Arab nations. So, in the end, it is funny to me that the 23 Arab nations who have a combined total of 5,000 Jews now, after having millions prior, they all committed genocide in their lands. And now that all the Jews and the Christians are gone, now they are pointing at the one nation in the area that is diverse in any way. Every other nation here is homogenous, except for Lebanon, which had diversity, truly as much diversity as you could really think of, as balanced as it got between Christian, Druze, Jews, Muslims, Greek Orthodox, etc. It was quite the balance. And now, because of the PLO invading and Hezbollah invading, the Mennonite Christians and the Druze, etc., all those really are gone, and it's now just becoming a more Muslim nation, losing a lot of the diversity that it once had. So, all these nations essentially are homogeneous and have very little diversity, and because of that, they are pointing and saying you're committing genocide after they all simultaneously committed genocide. And there are over 2 million Arabs within Israel, not the Palestinians. Those don't count. Not that they don't count, but they don't count in these numbers. And so they are, I mean, this is the most diverse nation in the Middle East, by far. The only one not committing genocide, yet they are accused of committing genocide. Now, when it comes to occupation, what's very interesting is, so we have accusations of occupation, but especially from those like Turkey, yet Turkey is currently occupying 3 nations, Cyprus, Syria, and Iraq. And they're doing so because they will never allow the self-determination of the Kurdish people. And they have stated this and reiterated it. And they have said that the Kurds are allowed to be second or third class citizens in Turkey, but they are never allowed to form their own state. And if they do, it is considered an existential crisis to Turkey, and they will immediately declare war upon the Kurds. So, when it comes to the self-determination and rights of the Kurdish people, crickets. Kurdish crickets. But when it comes to the Palestinians, they love to use that issue. Now, do they ever actually help the Palestinians? Hell no. Because then they couldn't continue to use them. If you actually solve that problem, you want them to be perpetually in a state of suffering so that you can vilify Israel when in reality you don't want to do anything about it either because it's too sticky. So that to me is quite hypocritical of a statement, but it does represent a potential end of the Abraham Accords. It really does. And so they just kicked my cat accidentally. I kicked my dog. Yeah, I accidentally kicked my cat. She's fine, though. She is taking advantage of my ice bath and getting some really cold water in this 106-degree weather. Yes, we are averaging 106 this week in Texas. So, and then what was very interesting is this story from yesterday very much aligned with the story today of these settlements in the West Bank basically caused this statement as the last straw on the camel's back. So, okay. Now we got to get to some clips about the war that will surprise you because you're going to hear optimism from both CNN and Fox News and a similar level of optimism and similar conclusions. That doesn't happen too often with CNN and Fox. So let's listen. Now, we're going to start with, I believe his name is Admiral James Stavridis or Stavridis. I forget his freaking name. But Stavridis, thank you. But you're going to hear something very interesting from him and then a gentleman on Fox.
Well, we have things that we could sanction. We have very draconian sanctions, and we'll see what happens. Right now, the Strait is open. A lot of boats are coming through. People aren't reporting that, and that may slow down a little bit at some point. But right now, a lot of boats are coming through. The naval blockade has been extremely effective. Zero, I mean, literally while it's up, and it's been for quite a while, you know, except for a couple of little pauses where we opened it purposely with a deal. But the deal didn't terminate, you know, the deal didn't turn out to be what they said, you know, when they tell us one thing and they do another. But the blockade has been 100% successful. No boats have gotten into Iran, but they are getting in for other places. But we'll see. We're going to see what happens. It'll either be extremely good and oil prices are going to drop like a rock, or we'll continue to do exactly what we're doing. You know, they were talking about $350 a barrel, and it's today $84, $85. And we are getting a lot of oil out. But the other thing that's happened is people have found other
President Trump addressing there. We did get a little term limit in there as well, Admiral Stavridis. We don't have to talk about term limits. But when it comes to what is happening in Iran, right, we also have the UAE suspending at this point all trade with Iran. Iran's foreign minister has said that the U.S. blockade had contributed to shortage and price increases. So there's some evidence, right, that this economic pressure is working. And that, sources tell CNN, is really becoming the focus for the administration, not so much the military campaign. Yes. The question, though, how long do you believe the hardline IRGC can actually wait out that pressure?
Months, but not years. And that's the good news for the administration. They'd love to get this over with in a matter of weeks, but that, unfortunately, is not how sanctions work. It's not how blockades work, not how embargoes work. They take time to build economic pressure. But I think that is the president's best option at this point is patience, keep the blockade in place, put economic pressure on Iran, get them back to the table that way, and force them to open the Strait. It's a tale of two blockades. They're blockading the Strait of Hormuz. We're blockading their coastline months, but not years.
So I had to cut it off a little bit, slight editing there, because and normally I don't do that, but had to fit it into the 2:20-minute mark. So what he was saying before he cut off is the Trump administration does have to be patient with said blockade, but they were looking at months, not years, of being able to get a resolution or a response from Iran that would be considered positive. And so he is saying that the economic squeeze is working, but for those of you who think CNN is biased and Fox is not, or otherwise, or the vice versa, well, I actually have something very similar to show you.
So we are told that many Iranians are struggling to afford groceries as the Trump administration continues to go after that country's economy. This is the next step. Jonathan Hunt knows it well, live in Tel Aviv to bring us the latest from today. Jonathan.
Good morning to you, Bill. We are in the early stages, of course, of what President Trump has termed economic warfare against Iran. The next, more draconian stage due to be detailed by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Monday. But any sanctions program isn't going to be easy to enforce. When you look at the number of land borders, for instance, Iran shares 7 different countries having land borders with the Islamic Republic. And to the north there, look at the Caspian Sea. That gives Iran direct access to Russia. There's also direct access to China via a land route through Afghanistan. Neither of those countries, according to General Jack Keane, are going to be very willing to take part in any sanctions program.
So it might be confusing to people when he said 7 countries border Iran, and you're like, well, I only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, then you have Armenia and Azerbaijan. And you're like, what's that third little country right there? That's also Azerbaijan, which is funny. I don't know how this is a sustainable thing, especially when our Azerbaijan and Armenia are at war. I believe this region is called Nagorno-Karabakh, if I remember correctly. And I'm usually pretty good at geography, but Nagorno-Karabakh, I believe, is the disputed area that Azerbaijan took away from Armenia. But yeah, those are going to be your 2 countries that are bordering Iran that they do not have highlighted. And very interesting to note, so Azerbaijan and Armenia are in a war, and Azerbaijan gets most of its drone weaponry from where? Israel. Now, oftentimes, I make fun of people for having Israel derangement syndrome and thinking that Israel is the answer to everything. And then when Israel is genuinely involved, most people have no idea. So Armenia and Azerbaijan are at war, and Azerbaijan, a very rich oil nation, is seen as working with Israel, and Armenia is more on the Russia side. So interesting details there. So now we can continue with the clip, but as we're hearing, the economic pressure upon Iran is actually working.
Listen here.
Certainly, Russia and China have a vested interest in the United States not succeeding in the war against Iran. That they want to keep their foothold in the Middle East, and that's Iran. And that is why they're helping them.
Now, there is widespread acknowledgement, though, that the economic pressure is beginning to bite. Prices are going up, availability of goods is going down, and even some within the Iranian leadership are now talking about a change in approach. President Pezeshkian saying today, for instance, quote, "It is better to end the war today when we are in power and dignity and the whole world acknowledges our victory and emphasizes that America, contrary to all regulations, attacked our schools, hospitals, and infrastructure and is hated in the world." To my recollection, Bill, that is the first time we have heard a senior Iranian official use the words "end the war today." But as I say, he is on the more moderate wing, for the moment at least. The more hardline wing within the IRGC seems to have the upper hand. We'll see if that changes with this renewed economic pressure, Bill.
So, very important statement. Yes, Iran has a president, and that is separate from the Ayatollah, which in a theocracy like Iran, the Ayatollah is the real power player. The president is more of a figurehead, best way to put it. But this is what the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, said. "It is better to end the war today when we are in power and dignity, and the whole world acknowledges our victory and emphasizes that America, contrary to all regulations, attacked our schools, hospital, and infrastructure and is hated in the world." Now, what he is saying is quite true of if Iran continues this, then they might be seen as the enemy, as the bad guy in this, not the United States or Israel, which is obviously very easy to depict as the enemy, as Israel is the little Satan and America is the big Satan in this world. And so it would be quite easy to make sure that the bad guy label sticks to the Americans and the Israelis. Yet the Iranians are concerned that if inflation continues to go up in their own country, especially, and this is prior to the economic squeeze, they were having major inflation issues, but now it's getting even worse, and the scarcity of goods is coming into play. Even though they are quite the independent nation, they are able to be self-sufficient in so many different ways, economically, militarily, etc. Even despite how resource-rich their nation is, naturally, they are dealing with the pains of the war and the economic squeeze and our blockade upon their blockade. Now, that brings us to the Strait of Hormuz tracker, which we cover every episode as well, just like going to the map. And, well, earlier when I was checking this before the show, it had actually said 6 ships were waiting. 6 ships were going through, and that 350 vessels. Right now it's 1 ship, and there are 350 vessels waiting. But I do recall earlier it was 6 ships being in transit, and then over 450 vessels waiting, which does show you that the Trump administration's claim of getting the vessels through on their side, but just having them turn off their transponder so that you can't track them during this time. That that is actually seeming to be true. Again, if you had 450 vessels waiting a couple hours ago, and now you only have 350, I would assume that there's a lot of transponder games going on right now. Best way to put it. And so the Trump administration is saying, now they are saying that they are able to actually reach the 20 million barrels a day of the pre-war baseline. They're actually saying that they are able to get close to that and achieve that. But officially, as you see, what the official amount of vessels getting through, anywhere between a couple percentage points and at best 10 or 12. You'll see a 25 once in a while, 28 once in a while. And so part of it is the Iranians trying to enforce their own blockade. They cause an oil spill. And they are not currently able to control the Strait. So the original deal with Iran and its supplicant, its vassal state, Oman, and if you noticed, who wasn't in the joint statement? Of course, the Switzerland of the Gulf has to pretend it's neutral and not be a part of that, but I'm sure they wanted to be part of it. Now, they had the Iranians and the Omanians had a deal where Oman takes the outbound, Iran takes the inbound traffic. So obviously hugging the Iranian coastline more so is going to give you the Iranian route. Hugging the Omani coastline is going to give you the Omani route, which at this point is just the American route that we're protecting all the ships that want to go through in the blockade. So at this point, our blockade of their blockade is working. And then I did get a good comment, and we respond to all the comments. So Robbie House IV asked, are there current efforts to construct a pipeline that bypasses Hormuz running through the UAE and Oman? And Robbie, not only is that a great question, but we have answered this on this show before. And I will do that again right now. So there are developments of the port of Fujairah and expanding the port of Fujairah, expanding the existing Saudi Arabian pipeline, and then expanding this pipeline that goes through Iraq and Turkey. With all the expansions, they're looking at somewhere between 12.5 million barrels per day and up. And then on top of that, I mean, just right there, 12.5 million, you're more than half, and you're already greatly reducing the need of the Strait of Hormuz. But then if you make up the rest in terms of allowing shipping to come through the Red Sea and up through the Suez, then you can easily get to 20 million a day and replace the Strait of Hormuz. So the Strait of Hormuz is replaceable, and because of what we talked about on every single episode, which is the demonstrated risk, the war risk premium, it's currently at 6%, which is 40 times the 0.15%. And earlier today it was at 5%. So actually pretty low comparatively. The 4, 5, and 6 are some of the lowest numbers we've seen in terms of the war risk premium. Oftentimes we were looking at 8, 9, and 10. We had an episode where we reached 10% on the war risk premium. And I showed it to you live, baby. So we don't just talk it, I prove it here. That's one of the key differences of this show versus others. Some people will talk out their booty. I will actually show you what the booty is talking about. So 6% is a lot. And 6 to 10%, that's a lot. So the as long as the demonstrated risk is less in the Red Sea than the Strait of Hormuz, then combined with all these different factors of we are looking to get out of the Persian Gulf when it comes to our bases. We are actually looking to move westward and move more inland. And that actually was one of the pieces of contingency, one of the stipulations from Iran of what they were requesting in terms of their MOU. So that was part of their terms of the deal. And it looks like we are capitulating to that because we are questioning if we're going to rebuild our own bases in this area. And so if we are doing that, that looks like we could, in the end, support more of the Red Sea and replace the Strait of Hormuz. And there is historical precedent to this. The Strait of Dardanelles, the Dardanelles Strait, used to be as important as the Strait of Hormuz. And then in World War I, Turkey messed around and found out when they put too many mines in the strait. And because of that, in the end, the Dardanelles lost strategic importance and people went elsewhere. And the Strait of Hormuz, that could happen to them. And I believe the president is concerned that, one, that their inflation is going to go up, but two, that they become the enemies on the world stage. Why? Because there are many countries that rely upon their oil, particularly Japan, South Korea, India, and China. Okay? And what they're not mentioning, the Gulf nations, yes, they can get their own oil, but if they have to get it from somewhere else, it would be someone like Iran. So there's a lot of, mostly the Asian countries who really rely upon Iranian oil. Right now, they don't look like the bad guy or the ones who are causing this, but it could very quickly turn to where Iran is seen as the bad guy. And then it's going to be even tougher for them, because if China is going to get sanctioned by Trump, and we really hope that would happen, because if you don't sanction China, there is no way you can put real economic pressure on Iran. China buys over 30 billion of the 43 or so billion per year in oil sales from Iran. If you can't sanction China, not much is going to actually happen to Iran. But if China needs to get out of said sanctions by putting the blame on Iran and making Iran out to be the bad guy, then Iran's in a much different spot than they were. And I believe that's what the president very wisely is saying of, hey, we need to get out while the getting's good, and while we are still seen as the good guys in this war, because we could very quickly lose this. And very quickly, let's listen to this clip.
The JCPOA, that was the Obama deal that was such a disaster that he made years ago. Had I not terminated that deal, Iran would have a nuclear weapon. And they would have used it very quickly. They would have wiped out Israel. They would have wiped out the Middle East. And you saw that because when this thing started, surprisingly to everybody, they started shooting missiles at sort of semi-neutral countries. They were going after Saudi Arabia, Qatar. They were going after UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and nobody really knew they were so involved. And they started hitting everybody. If they had a nuclear weapon, they would.
Speaking of Bahrain, this is important. We have not really covered this yet. So Bahrain is where we stationed the 5th Fleet. The 5th Fleet in Bahrain was where this was a very strategic base for us, because our carriers in this area would have been more adept to go and refuel and resupply and recharge everything over in Bahrain. It would have only been a 2 or 3 day trip and would have been much easier to supply. But now we have to go to Diego Garcia, and I'm just going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. One sec. So Diego Garcia, if you recall, actually at one point I knew it was this British Indian territory. There we go. So this is the area of Diego Garcia. And actually, my father-in-law has been to this location. He's told me about it. So it's a joint United States-UK base. And the interesting aspect about that is, at the moment, I believe the United States is trying to acquire this from the UK. And I think the UK is trying to give it up, according to the new prime minister that they have. But okay, so what's interesting about Diego Garcia is this is where Iran launched a missile at, and we were able to strike it down before it got there. But if you notice, it's quite the distance, and so that disproved many notions about Iran's lack of striking capability. In fact, if Iran is able to strike Diego Garcia, then they can strike as far as London, essentially. So that's the same type of range. And long story short, that carrier that was in here for so long, I believe it was the Roosevelt, the USS Roosevelt. Anyways, it was here for 200 days, and then it was replaced by another aircraft carrier. And because of that, normally the Fifth Fleet of Bahrain, only 2 to 3 days away, and we're going to be able to resupply everything. But they had to go to Diego Garcia, which took 10 days, and Diego Garcia does not have the capacity to resupply multiple aircraft carriers. So we were already in quite a pickle, and the fact that the Iranians have harmed the bases within the Persian Gulf to the point where the United States is not sure that we're going to rebuild said bases has already affected our operations. And that's an underreported portion of the story that I wanted to get into really quick, since he mentioned Bahrain. We really haven't talked about Bahrain too much on the show.
Would have used it on everybody. And look, there would be no Israel if there was not a Donald Trump president.
I think there'd be no Saudi Arabia either.
Right now, I believe the Middle East would have been entirely wiped out, but Israel definitely would have been wiped out. There's no question. They tell me that there would be no Israel if there was no Donald Trump. The JCPOA, that was the Obama.
So, two things. One, the JCPOA, Obama's terrible deal with Iran, we prove that it is terrible if you go to part 2 or part 3 of our Iranian proxy series, where we cover the history of Hezbollah. And part of the history of Hezbollah was the JCPOA deal. Obama saved Hezbollah from complete dismantling. The DEA and Project Cassandra had Hezbollah's entire funding apparatus mapped out. They were going to be able to shut them down and shut off their funding, meaning that they would have been stranded, and then Iran would have had to make some really tough choices with Hezbollah of how to continue funding them. And, do we need to make up for the money that was just lost? And the money is illicit drug trade through the cartels in South and Central America. So Obama, through the JCPOA, saved Hezbollah from destruction, and also showed you that Iran's hierarchy of priorities, it goes proxy and the Strait of Hormuz, the proxies and the Strait of Hormuz, you can either say 1, 2, 1A, 1B if you want to really quibble. But either way, those two are far more important to them than the nuclear program. And you could see that through the JCPOA. Now, with Israel, would Israel exist without Donald Trump? At this point, probably not, because they continue to overexert and overextend themselves, getting into every fight possible. And if they had to rely upon their own weaponry and their own manpower, man and woman power, actually, it is funny how the feminists don't acknowledge that the military that most successfully disproves that women can't be used in combat is Israel. Israel has the most women in combat out of any military in the world, especially successfully and in an organized fashion. And yet, because it is big, bad, evil Israel, you'll never hear the feminists talk about that, which is also funny. The Democrats hate Israel now, and that's where all the feminists lie. So they ain't going to give Israel any credit for being the most feminist of the militaries. You can say that, hey, they are depicting them and portraying themselves as moral, and that is just them posing that way. But they are certainly the most feminist army in the world. That's going to be tough for a lot of people to reckon with, but it's true. So, okay. We are already over 2 hours. And let's see. I've covered a portion. Oh my God. So, okay. I cannot play this with sound, but you have to check this video out. This is the Young Turks. It's 45 seconds of Hassan Piker, Cenk Uygur, and Anna Kasparian saying the N-word. Hard R. Now, often they are quoting things back in the early to mid 2000s. In particular, if you remember Rick Perry, I forgot about this scandal. He had and his family bought a ranch from a prior ownership that the prior ownership had labeled that ranch N-word head ranch. But see how I censored? No, they didn't have to, because this was early YouTube where you could say whatever the hell you wanted and still get monetized. And wow. And you forget, back in the early 2000s, this is going to be controversial to say, but this is quite true. The stance on the N-word was so different. If you're in Gen Z, you actually might not realize this, but a good example of this is Sarah Silverman's comedy. And listen to how many jokes where she uses racial slurs, uncensored, unedited. Obviously, she has many jokes where she is discussing a chink in the armor of certain racial slurs, and obviously one of them would be said in the armor. But in the end, she used tons of N-word jokes. Tons. And at the time, it was considered edgy, but it wasn't considered taboo to the point where you couldn't say it. And even if you were not black, and there is a massive revisionist history on this, so that people who did say the N-word hard R in public or on TV or on the internet, they don't want you to know about this. But certainly this happened. And it just reminds me of, why do the Democrat Socialists of America, why do these wokies have trouble getting black votes? Well, it's because those like Abdul El Sayed, their top surrogate is Hassan Piker, and Hassan Piker was part of the Young Turks dropping N-bombs all the time. So Yeah, he loves to talk about Israel's bombs on Palestine, but he's dropping N-bombs all the time. And then, so we have Angie Nixon. She supports reparations. She is the top DSA kook at this point. She's trying to replace Francesca Hong, who Abdul El-Sayed replaced. As you recall, we've covered many times his overseeing the euthanization of thousands of dogs and cats scandal. And so ultimately, I don't think anyone's ever going to top Abdul El-Sayed. Let's review the tape really quick. He hates guns. He hates fireworks. He hates July the 4th. He hates football. He hates Mackinac Island, the idyllic Americana vacation spot in Michigan. He hates dogs. He hates cats. And so it's going to be tough to beat him. But with Angie Nixon already saying that she is for reparations, it's going to be, I can't wait to see if she actually is able to compete with said crazies. And, okay, one more clip really quick before we go. This is Honesty on CNN, so be prepared. And this gentleman is not conservative. The gentleman on the right, his name is Carmelo Foster. He is a podcast host of The Fifth Column. I give him credit for being honest here.
The real problem with carrying this level of debt is that it creates a great deal more financial uncertainty. And by not looking at this reality in the face and acknowledging all of the entitlement issues that will continue to get materially worse as our population ages and the economy continues to suffer under the weight of all of this economic burden, is that no one, not Democrats, not Republicans, seem to be at all interested in getting serious about tackling these things. At the same time that all of this is happening, we're having this democratic socialist revolution in this country where people are actually advocating for far more expensive policies than the ones that are already on the table and that are already bankrupting the country. No one is being particularly serious right now. The real problem with carrying this level of debt is
what he said that was quite interesting was that we're having this Democrat socialist revolution where people are actually advocating for far more expensive policies than the ones already on the table. And then he's saying that no one's being really serious right now. And good for him. I respect nonpartisan discussion of politics. So good job, sir. Now, what is, to me, very interesting is the acknowledgement of, yeah, we understand that the current system is suboptimal, but the solutions offered by the Democrat socialists to said problems are far more suboptimal than the current systems that we have. And this is where a lot of the DSA candidates are going to struggle. For instance, they love to say Medicare for all. Well, there are many, especially Black Americans, who are saying, I have good health insurance. A lot of Black Americans work for the government and therefore already have good health insurance via the government. And so saying to them, hey, I want you to just trust us that this change in system is going to be better for you, they ain't going to fly with that because they like the system that they're currently in. Even if it is suboptimal, the solution that you're offering them isn't going to be better. It's going to be worse. So, and then very interesting, if you go through this thread, I have never seen this from mainstream media before, and acknowledgement, oh my God, I put up the wrong clip, so no wonder. Eric. Well, let me pull it up right now for you. Well, no, I can't. Anyways, there's a nice figure of seeing foreign-born versus native-born and you would see in participation in the labor force, and the foreign-born had a higher participation than the native-born. But, okay, since we're coming at the tail end of it here, and I did not receive any chat. I always love chat, and it's a shame we didn't get any. But, okay. Quick correction, really quick. So, small error. Nagorno-Karabakh is actually the southwestern portion of Azerbaijan here. Nakhchivan or whatever is this area. So slightly, very small error, but we talk about every little mistake here. There usually aren't too many, but yeah. And then, okay, I end the show with answering your questions. Nothing in the chat, but I have one from my dear mother who did not murder me. And so I am still here. Yes, she is not depicted as a mad or ill woman because she did not murder her own child. So, okay. She said, Trump votes by mail. And so this is a response to voter ID map fact-checked. And so let me pull up the voter ID map for you. I think I have it here saved now, finally. Yep, there it is. Perfect. So, quick story with the voter ID map. So, how many states actually have voter ID in a substantive fashion? Well, yes, photo ID required is really the only category I will respect. So, that is 13 states. And then if you add these 3 yellows, which are, I'm going to say quasi, yes, required is good, but no photo ID. So we're going to say 13 to 16. The rest are no. No actual ID when voting. Now, that includes Florida, which is where Trump and Mar-a-Lago are. And so Florida, not the most secure state yet, but they have changed their laws in terms of voting where you actually have to count as many votes as possible on election night, and you actually see quick results happening in Florida now and much fewer accusations of fraud because of this. Now, there's not zero. In fact, Dan Bilzerian, when he was going against Randy Fine, he had an interesting scenario where I believe it was like 39% reporting. He had 8,000 votes. And then the next time they updated the votes, he somehow had 6,000. Definitely fishy, should be looked into. But ultimately, as we've also discussed on the show, voter fraud is defined by if it's enough to overturn the election, which does seem weird. You would think cheating is cheating no matter what. No, cheating is only cheating if it can change the outcome of the election. Very interesting caveat, and part of it is because they don't want everyone to challenge every election. Fair enough, but it still is a precarious definition, in my opinion, and it puts the loser in a unfortunate predicament where they have to pay for their own audit and defense, which is why you often don't see any audits or any recounts. So this is a situation where the map of actual states that require voter ID is pretty lackluster. And so I did a whole segment on it called Voter ID Map Fact Checked. And my beautiful mother, who did not murder me or strangle me, she said, Trump votes by mail. The quote you used about India was from DJT himself. He's not a trusted source. I think I have always shown photo ID every time I voted. I currently live in California. I would dare challenge my beautiful mother on this. And when she says, I think I have always shown ID, I think that's because we reflexively, in every scenario, whether it's going to a hotel or whatever, we feel like we have to pull out the ID. Well, I can tell you, last time I was in California and I voted, 2016, I pulled out my ID and it was as if I had whipped out my genitalia. That's how inappropriate it was being presented as. Why are you showing us ID? That's terrible. Put that back. Ew. So I would challenge you and say I don't think you actually did show an ID because they often shame you. And if you didn't get shamed, you got a good election official, which we do talk about on this show. The only reason that American History of Voter Fraud, our film about election rigging, was able to be made was because of good, honest election officials letting you know about the vulnerabilities of the system to bad election officials, which is why they, as good election officials, are so keen on getting rid of the bad apples, because it is one election official who is dirty could swing an entire election by themselves. They have the time and the access because they run the election. So it is very important that we have good people within our system. We usually do. But the times we don't, for instance, great footage in the film of New Jersey in the 70s where they had election officials counting the votes and changing votes in the politician's home that they were trying to rig it for. And this is court testimony I am referring you to and relaying. It is documented fact. And there are many examples of this. In neighboring Philadelphia, there was an election judge and an election official who worked together for 30 years to do the same kind of operation. So, long story short, this is a major problem. And so when my beautiful mother says Trump votes by mail, that is pretty inexcusable and hypocritical. Now, you could say Trump is more in the category of the absentee or overseas military, where they have to vote that way because of circumstance, and that category, the absentees / overseas military, is always 1% or under, and that almost never would be enough to actually sway an election. You could say that, but I do dare say it would make a big impact if he voted in person on Election Day, even though that would be a security nightmare, especially considering how many assassination attempts have been on his life. I still think for the greater good and to incentivize in-person on Election Day voting, he should do that. But yeah, I do get that part. So when you say Trump votes by mail, that is pretty hypocritical and indefensible. The quote you used about India was from DJT himself. Now, I was able to corroborate that, though, and the Indian, and it's not the first time we've heard that about India. It's very common that they contrast our system with theirs, meaning they have over 2 times the amount of voters than we do just general populations. We have a little over 300 million people in America. They have over 600 million voters. They all have ID. It all gets checked and counted within a day. Now, the whole election usually takes place over a month, and that is not optimal. That is suboptimal, but they have a pretty decent excuse, which is 600 million voters. So, meanwhile, California takes longer to count, and they certainly don't have 600 million. So, great points, Mom, but I am going to refute some and agree with others. Now, we do this every single episode. I respond to your comments. Oh, we just got one, too, during the show. Democrat, and this is for the DSA continues to harm the Democrat Party segment from the Democrat. There's my beautiful voice from God Bless America 24. So, okay, let's read the comment. The comment was, Democrats invited the DSA into their big tent. Not smart enough to know that they will just burn it down with them in it. Very true. Yes, you are letting the inmates control the asylum, and that is a major concern. Now, okay, I think we've covered just about everything. This is a record for the longest episode yet, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I will be doing an episode Sunday, around 8 p.m. There's no deadlines on Sundays, but usually I'm pretty good about doing it around 8 p.m. I don't want you to wait too long, but we do shows every single weekday at 8 p.m., bonus episodes 6 a.m., and then we always do a Sunday one. This Sunday is the technically part 4, but we did PLO, Fatah, and Yasser Arafat as part 1, Hezbollah part 2 and part 3, because it was so much to cover, had to split into 2. Part 4 will be the Houthis, and then part 5 will be Hamas. But we're doing part 4 this Sunday. You got to check it out because, again, part 3, we went over how Obama saved Hezbollah. Okay, that was some juicy stuff. And the Houthis are essentially Somalian pirates that are just attacking Saudi Arabian interests because Iran and Saudi Arabia are arch rivals. And so Iran is trying to make the Strait of Hormuz palatable and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait unpalatable and vice versa. So that's why the Houthis exist. And so, yeah, it's going to be a good one. We're going to go over it. But, man, we covered a lot. So we really dialed into that story about Lindsay Clancy, gave you great historical context that no one else was given with Andrea Yates, Casey Anthony, and comparing it to the OJ case, saying this was the OJ Simpson case for women. And called out Candace Owens, who ridiculously was putting the blame on the doctors and said the doctors killed the kid, not the mother. But Erica Kirk, she's a bad mother for just taking over Turning Point USA from Charlie Kirk and not being there enough for her kids. She's a bad mother, but the woman who killed her kids, not a bad mother. Part of why she is as objectionable as any character that we have on the right. And she should just be jettisoned to her own independent space, but she is unfortunately on the right. So, okay. This has been another, and then we covered the joint statement from practically every Arab nation. UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt. And then I covered you why this is all just talk, and they ain't going to do anything for the Palestinians. They don't ever do anything for the Palestinians. And that's what makes me laugh about the Arab world. A lot of talk, not a lot of sizzle when it comes to Palestine. And then we talked about, of course, just the economic D-Day and how Iran might actually have been impacted by said economic D-Day and how this economic squeeze might be really working, and how there's predictions on CNN and Fox that this might be done in months, not years, because I've been saying this is going to take years. Oh, look, you can see the ragu, the googie in the corner. He's covered up by the logo right now, but that's just an adorable cat. Good looking kitty. Oh, and he's climbing. Look at him climb. Oh my, so good. So, and he's enjoying the mulberry, and I hope you enjoyed the mulberry today and our beautiful ragu. This has been another episode of God Bless America, the longest episode of God Bless America yet. We're getting better every single episode, I dare say, and part of that is because of you. Thank you so much. Hope you like, subscribe, and I hope you comment so that I can talk to you the next episode. This has been God Bless America. I'm your humble host, Eric Abbenante. I will see you Sunday at 8 p.m. for part 4 of the Iranian proxy series. Stay blessed. Have a great weekend. We've earned it. And see you Sunday. Good night.